Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this session for our third annual Faculty Summit, Learn Where You Work, a distance learning approach to solve the MLT shortage. My name is Siobhan Bowen, and I'm a director with the Wisconsin Technical College System Office. And we're very excited to be hosting our third WTCS Faculty Summit. As we get started, I'm just going to take a few minutes to run over a few session considerations, expectations, things like that. Now, for those of you who are with us, we are very excited that you were able to join us for this session. Totally get that many of you are taking time out of your busy work and your family time to be here with us. So we really do look forward to making the most of our time together during this session. We do have some friends who are looking forward to viewing the session at a later time as well. So this is just a gentle reminder. You may have seen it when you came into the room that today's session is being recorded. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So feel free to share any questions that you have in the chat so that, they don't escape your mind as the session is taking place. And we'll make sure to address everything at the end of the presentation. If you would like to turn on captions during the session, you'll just click those three dots at the top of the meeting and then click on language and speech and then click on turn on live captions. And if you need some more information on live captions, you can visit the Microsoft support link that I placed in the chat there for you. What else? At the end of the session, we'll be putting a link to an exit ticket in the chat that just asks you for brief feedback on the session and encourages you to share one action step that you want to take based on the information shared from this session. So please take some time to fill those out for us. And then resources and recordings are going to be available on the WTCS Faculty Summit site. Let me throw that link into the chat for you as well, so you have access for that. Our goal is to have those recordings and resources uploaded within the next week, and you'll receive an email when resources are available. So I think with that, you've been looking at the title of the screen. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing because I'm not the one running the show, so I'm gonna turn it over to our presenters, Corey and Valerie. Please take
All
it
right.
away.
Thank you so much. I am going to make sure I click that sound tab that I forget every single time when I screen. Yeah, so let's see here. Let's start this thing. Okay. So yeah, welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining us this evening, and thanks for choosing this presentation. It looks like there was lots of other really great topics to choose from out there. So my name is Corey Sullivan. I am the program director for the medical lab technician and phlebotomy program at North Central Technical College. And with me tonight is my partner and full-time faculty, Valerie Natsky. And for those of you that aren't super familiar with MLT, it stands for Medical Laboratory Technician. And we are the folks that do all of the behind the scenes testing of patient specimens. And we help doctors figure out that diagnosis and treatment plans to help their patients. So over the last few years, we had a handful of inquiries about what we've been doing with this new MLT distance learning option. So we're super excited about showing some of these interesting and innovative things that we've been doing over the past several years. So there are a lot of MLT to MLS programs out there right now. That's the 2-year to 4-year connecting programs, but there's very few programs for entry-level lab positions like phlebotomists, and lab assistants, and specimen processors, for them to be able to earn an associate's degree and become an MLT. So the presentation that we created here is going to show you how we've been able to bring our program to the rural and underserved areas across the United States. So right now we've got 2 students from the St. Kitts Islands in the Caribbean, and we have 1 student that is a phlebotomist working on the largest Air Force base in the United Kingdom. So we've gone international. So our program is going to show you how we can give entry-level lab employees that opportunity to advance their careers without actually having to leave their current positions. And then by removing some of those barriers, it's going to allow us to support their career growth and then just strengthen the lab workforce overall. And by the end of the presentation, you'll be able to describe at least 2 instructional strategies that show how our distance learning students are meeting the course competencies. We're going to demonstrate some new tools that we've used in hopes that maybe you can take these back to your classrooms. And then we're going to be able to compare 2 of the major outcomes that are required for our MLT program accreditation.
So for a long time in our profession, we've talked about the shortage of laboratory professionals, but we didn't want to just assume that this was a real problem. We did some research and collected some data, and what we did was followed the data. And when we looked at the data, when the research was done, and this is the most recent data that we have. This research was done 2 years ago. We did indeed find that there is projected to be a large gap between new laboratory professionals entering the field and the number of job openings that need to be filled. And so this poses a real problem for our profession. And this is an area of the healthcare workforce that artificial intelligence is not going to be taking over. We have real blood samples from real people that need to be handled. So we thought about it and asked ourselves, what are we going to do about this? And what can we do about this as faculty? So looking further at the data and going back 25 years, we looked at what could be contributing to this gap and this shortfall. And one of the questions that we asked was, what about the number of schools that offer the MLT and MLS degrees? And for those not familiar with our profession, the MLT is that associate degree level that's offered at the technical colleges, and the MLS is the bachelor's degree level of training that's typically offered at 4-year colleges. And for the purposes of this research, they are combined into one. So for the last 25 years, the number of schools hasn't changed. It's essentially stayed the same. And not only has the number of schools stayed the same, 50% of the programs are rarely or never filled. So what this told us is that we have enough schools, but they're not located where they are accessible to our students. So when we looked a little bit farther at this, we found that there are indeed 13 of the states in the United States that have either 0 or 1 medical lab technician program, that associate degree level. And there are 12 states that have only 1 bachelor's degree MLS program. And so putting all of this data together, it seems that we do indeed have enough schools, but that the schools are not where the students are. And so that is where our distance learning option for MLT students came from. So our vision is that this distance learning option that we've developed here at NTC is a 3-point partnership. We have students in rural and underserved areas, and they get access to our MLT distance learning program with support from their sponsoring laboratories. And typically that is a lab that they are already employed in an entry-level position. So a phlebotomist, a specimen processor. It could even be like a medical assistant, somebody in those more entry-level roles. And so all 3 of these parts, the college, the student, and the sponsoring lab, work together to hopefully decrease the gap between new MLT professionals and that number of job openings. And the sponsoring lab, then, they get to choose who they would like to support and elevate. And they would be able to identify these employees that may have aptitude to move forward in their careers. And there are a lot of costs to the onboarding process of a new employee. There's the advertising piece, there's the interview process. And this process, our distance learning option, would kind of bypass that. And it would allow the sponsoring lab to grow their workforce from within because they are choosing who to support. And this would then help them reduce some of these hiring and onboarding costs.
So yeah, now we have the capacity to accept more MLT students. Right now, we're currently capping the distance learning cohorts to 14 due to the limited number of spots on our online gen ed courses. But if we start seeing this increased interest in this program, that's going to cause an increase in the gen ed course capacity as well. So we know that there's this workforce shortage in lots of areas. The data shows that. So we also know that the areas that are hit the hardest are the rural and underserved. So ultimately, this kind of all lands on geography. It's difficult for those students to have to drive long distances to attend the colleges that actually have the programs. And a lot of these students are juggling work and family and lots of other obligations. So the program was developed from that real data, the data that we just saw. We took all of that and we presented it to our administration, and we got full support right away. So our goal was to create a model that fit this distance learning program. So all of our gen ed courses, they have online options. 4 of our core MLT program courses, they're fully online. So we have this remaining 10 courses that we had to figure out. So what we did is we created this hybrid format, and that allows us to give this program to the distance learning students. The hybrid format includes recorded lectures and online submissions for assignments to Canvas. We use HonorLock as a proctoring service. We've got lots of engaging and interactive online activities. And then most of the courses have a student lab manual. And the lab manuals lay out all of those hands-on requirements very clearly for the student, but then also for the laboratory staff that's working with the students. And all of our courses are delivered synchronous. All the due dates are the same for the in-person students and the distance learning students. The in-person students are going to be coming here and working with the faculty here at NTC, and the distance learning students are going to be working with an already certified MLT, MLS, or equivalent in their sponsoring lab.
So here is an example of how our in-person students at NTC in Wausau and our distance learning students do equitable work based off of instructions in the lab manual. And this is just one example. So here in this example, this is from the clinical chemistry course. This is a dilution lab, and it gives flexibility on what analyte or what test that they would use. So in-person students run a glucose test here at NTC with NTC instructors in the classroom, and distance learning students would run whatever test their mentor asks them to run in their sponsoring lab to satisfy this requirement. And distance learning students have already provided information to us here at NTC about their sponsoring lab and the ability to perform automated chemistry testing as a requirement for program entry. So the work is not completely equal, but it is equitable. So they are doing the same work, and the lab manuals have clear instructions for all of the students, so they know exactly what to do, and the mentors know exactly what to do.
All right, so we just saw an example of the student lab manual with those clear instructions. And now let's take a look at what we have in Canvas for our students. This is one of our urinalysis labs. And if it pops up here, as you can see, we've got nice clear instructions for the in-person students. And we also have easy to follow instructions for our distance learning students. And if the preceptors need to be involved, they're going to have a list of instructions as well. So we know that every laboratory is different and the testing capabilities are different everywhere. So again, we're going to use that term equitable. It's never going to be exactly the same, but we're going to try to make it as close as we can. So if the in-person students are going to be performing a complete urinalysis test here on campus, well, then the distance learning students should be able to do a complete urinalysis test in their sponsoring lab. So some of those new tools that we've been using and that we've already implemented in most of our courses, let's start with Media Lab. So Media Lab is an online platform that offers case simulations in lots of different areas. We got blood bank and microbiology and hematology and urinalysis and body fluids and chemistry. So they make me log in every time here. But let's take a look at some of these case simulations and what we get to provide our distance learning students. So this is a bacteriology case simulation. This is just one example of what Media Lab has to offer, where students will actually be performing online identifications of different types of microorganisms. So just as the in-person students would be looking at gram stain results, and the other characteristics, the distance learning students are going to be doing the exact same thing online. They get to choose all of these other characteristics and choose all of the tests that go along with these organisms, ultimately getting us to that goal of, correctly identifying the organism in question. So the bacteriology case simulations don't give us a grade. It's the students' results compared to the experts' results at the end, and it makes it difficult to populate a grade in Canvas. So what I've done is I've created an assignment in Canvas with lots of in-depth instructions for the students on how to do this, but the assignment is going to mimic exactly what Media Lab has. So all of those results they've populated in Media Lab, they populate the same ones over here, and this is going to give us that grade at the end that will flow directly into the Canvas grade book. So that was for the bacteriology case simulator. I wanted to kind of take a peek at one of the hematology case simulations as well. Lots of buttons to click. But our hematology students, they work here on campus. We have slide sets. We've got lots of different slide sets. They're going to be looking at normal and abnormal patients for 2 full courses that we offer. The distance learning students, they are still required to be in their sponsoring lab working on a microscope just to make sure they get that hands-on experience, which is much needed when you become an MLT. But a lot of the labs that these distance learning students are in, they don't have the abnormal patient populations coming through. So it's difficult for them to see a lot of the abnormal stuff. So that's kind of where Media Lab comes into play. They have the ability now to go through and do an entire online differential identifying all of the normal and abnormal white cells. We also have the in-person students participate in all of these Media Lab cases as well, just because this is a great review for everyone and it reinforces all of that information.
So the next tool that we use in multiple courses is called GoReact. And using this tool, students can submit videos of themselves performing a hands-on skill. So for example, in our basic lab skills course, either Corey or I, whoever is teaching the course in that semester, would watch in person the students performing hand washing. Another skill we watch and check them off on is putting on and taking off personal protective equipment. So a gown, isolation gown, mask, and gloves. And there's a certain order those have to go on, and there's a certain things we watch for. Well, the distance learning students use GoReact and video record themselves doing those same 2 skills, and they submit that video then to either Corey or I, who's ever teaching the course, and we evaluate that skill ourselves directly. So that's a real nice way for us to do the assessment of these distance learning students. We also use GoReact to have students present case studies. And students can listen to each other's presentations. They get a chance to record themselves. They can play it back if they don't like it. They can watch other students' recordings and make comments on those. We then will watch those recordings and make sure they've gotten all the high points of each one of those cases. So we actually use GoReact quite a bit. It's a very nice tool. The next tool that we used is called Labster. And these are scenarios that laboratory testing would take place in, and we use that in our molecular diagnostic course. So it's virtual scenarios. And students have to think through these and work through these, and there's decision points throughout these laboratory scenarios. And then these then are graded. The next tool we have is Articulate Storyline. So we use these mostly in our coagulation course, and these are for our online labs in this course. Coagulation is fully online. So we have the ProTime test, the PTT test, the platelet function test, and a mixing study test, all in Articulate Storyline. So the students would do these virtual labs, including specimen acceptability, and they are graded. They have to get 80%. If they don't get 80%, then they have to repeat it. And so we can show you an example of that.
Welcome to the virtual ProTime lab. In this lab, you will evaluate specimens for acceptability, run the virtual ProTime test, and evaluate the lab results. To begin, the next series of questions will ask you to analyze patient samples for acceptability. The patient samples will look like this. With each change in patient sample, the contents of the tube and sample label will change. To read the label information, click on the blue label icon on the tube. Then answer any corresponding questions relating to the sample. Go ahead and practice that now. Click the blue label icon on the tube. When you're done reviewing the information, at the end of the module, you will see a results screen. You will need to achieve an 80% or better to pass. If you did not score an 80% or better, you are allowed to retry the scenario by clicking the retry button on the screen. When you are ready to begin, click Next. Your first patient sample belongs to Harry Chapin. On each of the following questions, click one response, then click Submit.
So that's a nice example of how we've used Articulate Storyline. At the end then of each of them, there is a little quiz that they have to take related to that particular test.
All right, and then last we have Panopto. Panopto is a recording platform that is super easy to use. I've got a couple of examples here. The first one here is a blood bank recording that we did. I'm going to let it play for about 90 seconds, but it's going to give you a good idea of how clear the images are for these videos and how close up you can actually get.
All right, welcome to blood bank tube reaction grading. In this video, we are going to demonstrate how to grade different tube reactions in blood bank and a couple of different methods on how to agitate the tubes properly. So first off, we want to make sure that we are not over agitating the tubes. We want the cells to dissipate on their own. So no tapping the tubes on hard surfaces and no over shaking. Now, we would always want to start with the red cell button on the top and the liquid portion on the bottom. A couple of different methods we use in blood bank would be the swirl and tilt method, where you're swirling the liquid portion around the red cell button and then tilt. And we're going to watch as the red cells flow down the side of the tube. The second method would be the shake and tilt method, and you give it a gentle shake and you tip and tilt. Shake the tube gently and you tip and tilt. And again, we're going to watch as the cells flow down the side of the tube in order to visualize everything appropriately. So I've made a serial dilution, and we are going to start reading some reactions. So with the 1:2 dilution, again, I'm going to start with the red cell button on the top and the liquid portion on the bottom. I'm going to give it a gentle shake and then that tip and tilt. And watch as the cells flow down the side of the tube.
Yeah, so that's just one example of one of the Panopto recordings, but there's lots of other uses for these. This one was recorded by our audio visual team here at NTC, but I've recorded lots of different demonstration videos just using my iPhone, and they all turn out fantastic. So another great feature about Panopto is being able to embed questions right within the recordings themselves. You can kind of make it a quiz, and the quizzes actually flow directly into the Canvas grade book as well. So I've got another demonstration here. This is from our microbiology clinical experience. We had a 30-year micro veteran come in and teach our classes, and we had lots and lots of recordings to make these engaging and immersive for our distance learning students. So I'll let this play for about 90 seconds also.
Before we dig into your genital cultures today, I wanted to take a side topic because, again, you will have questions on your registry, and I don't want to miss out on a small discussion. And one of those has to do with nosocomial agents that a patient in a hospitalized setting or a nursing home might be at risk to get. They go into the hospital for a surgery, and 4 days later, they end up with a MRSA infection. How does that happen? Why does that happen? Anyway, I have listed 3 of many what are called nosocomial agents. You can have MRSA, VRE, and perhaps you may or may not have heard about carbapenem-resistant Enterobacteriaceae, and they trunk those short as CRE. All this means is that a regular old bacteria has developed some resistance that makes treating it more difficult, and it becomes very important. When you think about nurses going from one patient room to another, they're using the ultimate in hand washing techniques so they don't spread these bad agents from one patient to another, or they try to minimize the transmission. The agent I want to focus on today is MRSA.
So this is one of those embedded questions. What we did with this is, if the instructor asked the questions of the student, then we would be able to pause the video and add the same question in. That way the distance learning students would have to answer just like the in-person students would. So here are some of the support services or support systems that we've set up for both the in-person and the distance learning students. We have scheduled weekly Zoom meetings for all the students, and they're optional, but it's a great way to reinforce the learning materials that we're working on currently, and then also go back and review some of the things that the students have been struggling with. This is also a great way for our in-person students to start interacting with the distance learning students, and they're recorded. So if a student is not able to make it at that scheduled day and time, they can always go back and watch it when they actually do have time available. The distance learning instructor check-ins. So we get to see the in-person students, 3 to 4 times a week. So we've got lots of interactions there, but we feel that it's equally important to connect with these distance learning students. So we started doing these short check-ins, 15 to 30 minutes, and it's basically just to see how everything is going and if they have any questions. We also have virtual office hours set up where students can schedule a meeting with any of the instructors, and that's another good way for them to go over any of the materials or answer any questions. And the distance learning students have all of the same access to the other services that NTC has to offer. We have tutoring, we've got mental health services, and our library has lots and lots of different things that they offer for all of the students. So between the faculty and the preceptor and the student, let's take a look at the faculty. So the faculty here at NTC are able to provide the didactic pieces for the distance learners. We've got the lectures and we've got the reading materials. The faculty also evaluate all of the assignments and the tests and the lab activity submissions. We're responsible for that final assessment of all of the course competencies, which includes the final exams and all of the practicals. And then we're here to help guide the students through their program progress. We're going to monitor grades and ensure that they're staying on track for success. And then we support the sponsoring lab as well, and we give them the tools and answer all the questions that they need because we want them to be successful as well. The preceptors, now the preceptors are the ones that are actually going to be working with the distance learning students on a weekly basis, acting as their mentor. They're going to assist the students with all of those hands-on tasks and verify the skills that they've performed. They'll also be helping with the competency assessments as the students start getting these skills checked off. So the preceptors are going to do that initial evaluation, but ultimately the final evaluation is going to fall to the faculty once everything is submitted to Canvas. And then the student. A lot of this responsibility is going to fall to the student, the distance learning student, because they have to be able to effectively communicate with the sponsoring lab, the preceptors, and the faculty here at NTC. They need to be professional and mature, self-starter, resilient, because we found that the rigor of our distance learning option is just as challenging as our in-person route. So when students apply for our distance learning program, we have 2 additional documents that are required before they can even enroll into the distance learning program. So we've got this statement of support, and it's located on the MLT Distance Learning Option webpage. We've got a link right here. And the statement of support is an important document that shows support for all of those hands-on lab activities for the entirety of the program, along with that 18-week clinical experience at the end. There's also some basic information about the courses themselves, and then some of the time requirements, the estimated time requirements of that sponsoring lab. So this gets filled out by the lab manager. There's a student section, and then there's a laboratory section, but then it gets signed and dated by the lab manager, and it goes to the program director, which is myself. I review and approve these documents. Once it's approved, then this triggers an affiliation agreement to be sent to the clinical site. And this is a legal document that binds the college with the clinical site, and it establishes some of those responsibilities between both. So these are the 2 main metrics that we keep track of. We have program retention rates, and then we have the certification exam scores. So for the program retention rates, these are calculated by using the number of students that begin the second half of the program and then make it through to graduation. So if we take a look at that 2023 to 2025 group, this is our very first distance learning cohort. So we had a total of 5 in-person students and 4 distance learning students. All 9 of them started the second half of the program and then made it on to graduation. So we had 100%. The 2024 to 2026 group, this was that second cohort of distance learning students, and these are just projected values. This group is projected to graduate this upcoming spring. And you can see we had 5 in-person students and 8 distance learner students that started the second half of the program. And you can see that we're estimating 80% of the in-person students because we actually just had one of our in-person students withdraw from the program for personal reasons. So for the exam scores, our MLT students, upon successful completion of the program, they have to take a certification exam in order to become a certified medical lab technician. So these are the most recent scores for 2025. So we had 9 students take the exam and 8 were successful. So one of the in-person students actually was not successful taking it on their first attempt. And all of the distance learning students were successful. So if we take a look at those scores, the in-person student average was 609 and the distance learning average was 515. Yeah, it's definitely lower than the in-person scores, but I'd like to kind of make a note here. The national average for 2025, the score was 513. So even though it was lower than the in-person, we're still above the national average. So what did we learn from all of this so far? So we learned that this works, this model works. The labs that we've been working with have been very complementary on the instruction and the quality of our distance learning program overall. Even though this wasn't one of the main reasons for starting the program, we did end up doubling our enrollment. And as an added benefit, our in-person students are getting this opportunity and this experience to connect with all of these students from across the country and get different perspectives and ideas. So here's Emma. Emma was one of the students in our first distance learning cohort that actually graduated this last spring. Emma lives in a very rural community in Upper Michigan and was working as a phlebotomist when she started the distance learning program, but she lived too far away from any college that offered an MLT program. And she actually said to me that if it wasn't for this program, she never would have been able to achieve this degree. So Emma was interviewed by our marketing team, and she was able to give us some of the insights about her experiences going through the distance learning program. And she had only absolutely great things to say. So right now she's currently working as an MLT at the lab that sponsored her. And she now has that opportunity to go on even further with her career and get her bachelor's degree and become an MLS, a medical lab scientist. So again, there's lots of those MLT to MLS connecting programs, but there's not very many entry level to MLT programs. And that's what we're offering. So if you're interested in reading more about Emma's whole story there, go ahead and scan that QR code. Otherwise, it's also located on the MLT distance learning option webpage. So here's our contact information. If anybody wants to reach out, if you have any questions after we're completely done with this, or if you want to learn more about what we've gone through and all of the processes, we would be more than happy to schedule a time to meet. So we hope that by sharing the work that we've done, maybe this sparks a few ideas for you, and then possibly, be able to take some of those tools that we demonstrated and bring them back to your classrooms. But again, thank you all very much for attending this and choosing our presentation. So we did save some time at the end for questions. So if anybody does have any questions, feel free to come off mute, or you can type it in the chat box and we'd be happy to answer.
Good evening. I have a question. This is Nader Mahdi from Blackhawk Technical College. Can you hear me?
Yes, we definitely can.
Yeah. Who are the sponsoring labs, the preceptors? That's the first question. And the second question is, students, the distance learning students, do they, in time-wise, do they finish the program like at the same time, their peers from the face-to-face sections, or they encounter obstacles that can, for example, cause any delay in their graduation. So do they ever encounter obstacles that can sort of prevent their graduation on time, or I think you mentioned some of these challenges, but can you talk more about that?
Absolutely. So Val, I'll take this one. So
Mm,
the
yeah.
distance learning students, we've kind of catered this program to the folks that are already working in a lab. They're entry level. They're either a phlebotomist, a lab assistant, or specimen processor. So all they're doing is seeking support from a place that they're already working at. So they really don't have to go out and seek sponsorship. We do have a couple of students that were not working and were not employed by these facilities, and they did work through that process and get sponsorship. And then for your second question, the distance learning students do stay on the same path, the same track as our in-person students, and they will be all graduating in the same time frame. We did see some struggles with the distance learning students, especially with that first group. I think we started with 15, and I think a lot of them had this idea that they could work 40 to 50 hours a week and then still maintain 17, 18 credits. And they found out very quickly, even though we tried to tell them not to take that many credits, because we have a part-time track that gets rid of all the gen ed courses first, and then you can focus on the core MLT program courses. But a lot of them took that full-time track. So we ended up out of that 15, we graduated 4. A lot of them took a step back and they ended up taking the part-time track anyway. So some of them are kind of falling in that next group that's going to be graduating this spring.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that answers the question. Thank you.
Welcome. All right, any other questions? All right, I think that's it. So I think, Siobhan, you have a few things at the end here.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Corey and Val, for sharing a great presentation with us today. Very much appreciate it. I think that those who joined us have similar sentiments. So thank you very much.